January 20th, 1944, Monte Cassino, Italy. The fog clings to the rugged hills, muffling the clatter of artillery and the distant rumble of supply trucks. Italian Lieutenant Marco Rossi peers through the slit of his foxhole, eyes scanning the rocky valley below. The winter air is thick with smoke, gunpowder, and the metallic tang of fear. Every sound is amplified, the distant whistle of shells, the chatter of German machine gunners, and the low, almost imperceptible hum of engines approaching from the ridge. Suddenly, movement catches Marco's eye. A formation of American tanks, gleaming olive-drab steel, crests the hill with a precision that seems impossible in this jagged, cratered landscape. He squints, trying to distinguish the silhouettes. M4 Sherman tanks, dozens of them, rolling forward with coordinated grace. He blinks, convinced it must be an illusion. Dio, they appear from nowhere. He whispers under his breath, gripping his rifle tighter. The Americans advance with shocking speed, their tanks maneuvering over rubble, fallen trees, and bombed-out terrain with an agility that seems to defy logic. Each Sherman's 75mm gun tracks targets, firing with deadly accuracy. The echo of cannon rounds ricochets through the valley, punctuated by the screams of panicked soldiers scrambling for cover. Marco watches, frozen, as one Sherman rolls up a slope and obliterates a machine gun nest that had been harassing his unit for hours. Nearby, Sergeant Giovanni Bianchi, responsible for coordinating a small battery of Italian anti-tank guns, shouts orders frantically, "Fire! Aim! Don't let them advance!" But the Shermans are relentless, their armor shrugging off small-caliber rounds, their mobility keeping them beyond the range of many Italian weapons. Marco and Giovanni exchange a look of disbelief. This is not the clunky, cumbersome tanks they had imagined. This is something different, something efficient and terrifying. The Italian troops had long underestimated American armored production. They were familiar with German panzers and the Italian semovente, but the Sherman's combination of speed, maneuverability, and firepower is an entirely new calculus on the battlefield. It is as if the Americans can conjure tanks from the earth itself. For every Sherman destroyed, two more seem to appear, advancing the line inexorably. Marco's mind races as explosions tear through the hillside. Soldiers fall around him, some screaming, some silently frozen by fear. He notes the disciplined coordination of the Shermans. Infantry riding in their shadows, engineers clearing obstacles, and artillery spotting targets in perfect synchronization. It is a battlefield choreography that Italian and German units have rarely encountered. Even as the Italians return fire, the results are devastatingly inefficient. Anti-tank rounds ricochet against the Sherman's armor. Bazooka teams scramble for angles, only to be neutralized by the tank's sheer speed. Marco's heart pounds. Every maneuver he anticipated the Shermans would struggle with. They navigate flawlessly. Every weakness he thought he could exploit. They cover instinctively. By mid-morning, the American advance has reshaped the battlefield. Hills that had seemed secure are overrun. Machine gun nests destroyed, defensive positions flanked, and Italian morale begins to crumble. The psychological impact is profound. It is not just the destruction, but the impossibility of stopping the advance that shocks the Italian soldiers. These tanks are not machines. They are symbols of industrial power made manifest on the battlefield. As smoke drifts across the valley, Marco finds himself crouched behind a fallen wall, watching the Shermans reposition with methodical precision. He realizes that their efficiency is not random. It is the product of American planning, logistics, and production capabilities. Each Sherman carries with it the weight of factories, supply chains, and disciplined crews who have been trained to operate as a cohesive unit. Marco's awe is tinged with terror. This is not a temporary advantage. This is a system that will continue to function day after day, hill after hill. Nearby, his comrade Bianchi mutters bitterly, "We are outmatched, and we knew it too late." The words hang in the cold Italian air. For the first time, Marco understands that war is not only about courage or skill, but about industrial efficiency, the relentless output of machines, men, and material that cannot be ignored. As the Sherman line pushes deeper into the valley, Marco silently swears to survive, to adapt, and to remember the lesson he is learning in real time. Underestimating the efficiency of American tanks is a fatal error. The roar of engines, the fire of cannons, and the smell of scorched earth are etched into his memory. Monte Cassino is no longer just a battlefield, it is a revelation. January 21st, 1944, Monte Cassino, Italy. The first light of dawn illuminates the cratered terrain, revealing a landscape marred by artillery and smoke. Italian Lieutenant Marco Rossi crouches behind a shattered wall with Sergeant Giovanni Bianchi, surveying the battlefield with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Overnight, the Shermans have shifted positions, occupying high ground that had seemed secure. Marco rubs his eyes, struggling to comprehend the speed and precision of the American advance. "We need to flank them. Somehow," Bianchi mutters, frustration tightening his voice. "But every ridge, every valley, they control it all." Their Italian units scramble to coordinate, using the few radio transmitters and signal flags available. Yet for every maneuver they plan, the Shermans counter with uncanny efficiency. Tanks slide down slopes, pivot across rubble-strewn streets, and fire into positions that should have been hidden behind cover. From a nearby vantage point, Marco watches an M4 Sherman traverse a narrow, winding road, crossing a broken bridge as if it were a routine patrol. Its 75mm gun fires with pinpoint accuracy, flattening an Italian machine gun nest and forcing soldiers to scatter into the rubble. Marco notes the reaction of his own men, faces pale, hands shaking, hearts racing. It is not only the destruction that terrifies them, but the seeming omnipresence of these tanks, always appearing where needed, always striking with precision. Italian anti-tank teams attempt ambushes, hiding behind collapsed buildings and stone walls. They fire 47mm and 75mm shells, aiming for weak points in the Sherman's armor. Explosions rock the ground as rounds impact, but too often the shells bounce harmlessly off. The American speed makes targeting nearly impossible, and the disciplined coordination between tanks and infantry ensures that each attack is met with immediate suppression. Marco watches as a Sherman tilts slightly, its tracks adjusting to the rubble, and in moments, a team of infantry emerges to secure the area. The efficiency is mechanical, almost inhuman. A German liaison officer, Hauptmann Dieter Klein, moves along the lines, observing both Italian troops and American advances. He shakes his head in disbelief. "They produce these tanks faster than we can destroy them," he says, voice low. Marco catches the words and feels a sinking understanding. The battle is not merely tactical, it is a war of industrial output. Each Sherman carries the weight of American factories, trained crews, and an inexhaustible supply chain. For the Italians, the realization is staggering. Even communication between units falters. Messengers are delayed, radios jammed by interference or damage, and the terrain itself hinders coordination. Meanwhile, the Shermans move like clockwork, executing combined arms maneuvers that the Italian and German forces struggle to counter. Marco observes one tank crossing a ridge, followed by engineers deploying a makeshift bridge, while artillery crews adjust their fire to suppress any hidden pockets of resistance. Each move is deliberate, precise, and devastatingly effective. By midday, morale among Italian units begins to falter. Soldiers whisper among themselves, recounting stories of tanks appearing from unexpected directions, seemingly materializing out of nowhere. "How do they do it?" one private asks, eyes wide with fear. Marco cannot answer. He only watches, heart pounding, as the Shermans methodically advance through what should have been fortified positions. It is clear to him that conventional Italian defenses, walls, ditches, and entrenched positions are no match for the combination of mobility, firepower, and organization that these tanks represent. The psychological impact is profound. Where bravery once inspired counterattacks, fear now dictates caution. Troops hesitate, second-guessing maneuvers, and commanders struggle to maintain order. Marco feels the weight of responsibility, knowing that every misjudgment could result in casualties or the collapse of their position. Yet even as he struggles to adapt, The lesson is undeniable. American tanks are not only a tactical tool, they are a manifestation of industrial and logistical superiority, capable of shaping the battlefield on a scale the Italian forces have rarely encountered. By evening, Monte Cassino bears the scars of relentless armored maneuvers. Smoke rises from destroyed positions, and the valley echoes with the distant hum of Sherman engines. Marco kneels, observing the battlefield and taking note of patterns, how the tanks exploit terrain, how infantry support is coordinated, and how supply lines ensure that the machines remain operational. He begins to understand that survival is no longer solely about courage. It is about comprehension, adaptation, and the ability to respond to an enemy whose efficiency borders on the uncanny. January 25th, 1944, Monte Cassino, Italy. The bitter wind whips across the shattered ridges as Lieutenant Marco Rossi trudges toward the command post with Sergeant Giovanni Bianchi at his side. The Italian defensive lines are frayed, morale is low, and the constant hum of Sherman engines echoes through the valley like an unrelenting drumbeat. Marco glances down at a map sprawled across a wooden table, tracing the latest American advances with a trembling finger. Every ridge they thought secure has been compromised. Every valley that offered concealment has been exposed. Colonel Vittorio Lombardi, an officer with decades of service in the Italian army, studies the battlefield reports with a grim expression. "They are everywhere," he mutters, gesturing at the map. "For every Sherman we knock out, 2 more take its place." The room is filled with tense whispers. Officers exchange looks that mix disbelief with dawning comprehension. The efficiency of the Americans is not random. It is systematic, an industrial and logistical machine that continues to produce and deploy armor with astonishing speed. From the ridges overlooking the battlefield, Marco watches a Sherman column maneuver flawlessly around craters and collapsed bridges, its 75mm gun tracking a hidden machine gun position. Supporting infantry follow closely, clearing buildings and securing routes for the next advance. Engineers construct temporary bridges under cover of tank fire, enabling other Shermans to cross previously impassable terrain. It is a display of combined arms warfare on a scale that Marco has never seen. The psychological shock is compounded by the realization that American factories back home are producing these machines by the thousands. Marco recalls reports from captured Allied propaganda leaflets and intelligence briefings. The United States has the capacity to replace losses almost immediately, keeping the battlefield perpetually reinforced. Each Sherman is not just a weapon, it is a testament to industrial might, planning, and the ability to sustain prolonged campaigns. Italian soldiers begin to whisper about tanks appearing from nowhere, an eerie acknowledgement of the speed at which the Americans redeploy armor. For Marco and his comrades, this is more than a tactical problem. It is a strategic revelation. The front lines are no longer static. Every ridge, every pass, and every valley is vulnerable to a force whose supply and replacement system is virtually inexhaustible. Hauptmann Dieter Klein, the German liaison observing the Italian units, steps onto the ridge and surveys the advancing Shermans. He mutters, almost to himself, "This is not just battlefield skill. It is an industrial war. They can outproduce, outmaneuver, and outlast us." Marco nods silently. For the first time, the broader strategic picture crystallizes. Even the bravest defensive positions are only temporary barriers against a force whose power is multiplied by organization, manufacturing, and logistical precision. As the day unfolds, Marco observes the Americans executing coordinated strikes that neutralize key artillery positions, allowing Shermans to advance with minimal resistance. It becomes clear that the efficiency he has witnessed is not simply a battlefield advantage, it is a manifestation of the Allied war economy itself. Each tank is a cog in a vast machine that integrates production, training, maintenance, and battlefield deployment into a seamless, relentless force. By nightfall, Marco sits quietly in his makeshift dugout, listening to the distant engine hum that has become an unceasing reminder of American presence. The realization sinks in. Survival in this new battlefield demands not only courage, but an understanding of the industrial and logistical realities behind every Sherman tank. Every maneuver, every advance, every tactical success the Americans achieve is backed by factories, supply lines, and meticulous planning thousands of miles away. The Italian and German officers share stories in hushed tones, recounting moments when a Sherman appeared in unexpected locations, destroyed entrenched positions, or simply seemed to vanish and reappear elsewhere. They laugh nervously, shake their heads, and take notes for after-action reports. It is a strange mixture of fear, awe, and reluctant respect, the acknowledgement that the war is being waged not only with weapons, but with industrial efficiency and relentless logistical capability. For Marco, the battle at Monte Cassino is no longer only a struggle of men and guns. It is a lesson in the modern mechanics of war. The Shermans are not merely armored vehicles, they are symbols of an unstoppable system, demonstrating how production, coordination, and human ingenuity can overwhelm even the most entrenched defenses. As darkness falls and the wind whistles through the craters, Marco realizes that the true power of the Americans lies as much in their factories as on their tanks, a lesson that will resonate long after the echoes of Monte Cassino fade. January 28, 1944, Monte Cassino, Italy. The early morning fog clings to the shattered ridges, casting the battlefield in a gray haze. Lieutenant Marco Rossi crouches behind a ruined stone wall with Sergeant Giovanni Bianchi, peering through the mist at the distant rumble of Sherman tanks advancing along the valley floor. The Italian forces have begun implementing new defensive strategies, but the sheer efficiency and mobility of the M4 Shermans make even the simplest countermeasures a formidable challenge. Colonel Vittorio Lombardi has convened a hasty meeting with his unit commanders, the maps spread across a battered table. "We cannot meet them head-on," he warns. "They will outmaneuver us, as they have before. Ambushes, choke points, mines. These are our only options." Marco takes note of every detail, tracing routes with his finger, analyzing the terrain, and planning positions for his small detachment. Every plan must account for speed, firepower, and the seemingly inexhaustible supply of Shermans. By mid-morning, engineers and infantry work feverishly to prepare anti-tank obstacles. Mines are buried in strategic choke points, and felled trees are positioned across narrow roads. The Italians aim to force the Shermans into kill zones, where concentrated fire from 47 Lowler and 75mm guns might inflict damage. Marco crouches low, helping to position a portable artillery piece on a ridge overlooking a main approach, his hands trembling with both anticipation and dread. The first Sherman column approaches around 10:30 a.m., the low hum of engines cutting through the cold air. Marco and his men hold their breath. The tanks glide over the rough terrain with unexpected agility, their tracks adapting to rocks and rubble as if the engineers' obstacles were mere suggestions. Marco fires a warning round, heart pounding, but the Sherman continues forward, impervious to the makeshift defenses. A sudden explosion rocks the valley as a mine detonates beneath one of the tanks. For a brief moment, hope surges. One Sherman is disabled. Soldiers cheer quietly behind cover, adrenaline spiking. But before the Italians can reorganize, another tank maneuvers around the obstacle, its 75mm gun already firing at the hidden artillery position. Marco ducks as shrapnel sprays across the ridge. The lesson is brutal but clear. American crews adapt swiftly, exploiting every opening with calculated precision. Throughout the day, Italian units attempt several ambushes. Bazooka teams fire from concealed positions, infantry squads rush to flank armored vehicles, and machine gun teams fire at tracks. The results are mixed. A few Shermans are damaged or temporarily immobilized, but almost immediately, others move in to secure the area, supported by accompanying infantry. Marco notices the psychological effect on his men. Each failure chips away at confidence, even as they understand the necessity of persistence. By afternoon, Colonel Lombardi orders a regroup and reassessment. Marco and his squad take refuge in a bombed-out building, reviewing the morning's encounters. "We cannot win by force alone," he murmurs to Bianchi. We must predict their moves, strike together, and conserve what we have. It is a tactical evolution born of necessity, an acknowledgement that raw courage and numbers are insufficient against the combination of American mobility, firepower, and coordination. As evening falls, Marco surveys the valley, noting tracks in the mud, freshly displaced rubble, and the distant glow of Sherman headlights as crews reposition for the next day. The Italians have learned to respect not only the tanks themselves but the system that supports them. Fuel supply lines, trained crews, coordinated infantry, and the logistical backbone of a nation producing armor at an industrial scale. In the quiet moments before night, Marco reflects on the paradox of adaptation. Each attempt to counter the Shermans reveals both the limits of Italian and German tactics and the resilience of American military organization. His men are fatigued, bruised, and shaken, yet they continue to plan, learn, and adapt. The battle is not only physical, it is an ongoing test of observation, strategy, and understanding of an enemy whose efficiency seems almost mechanical. By the time darkness envelops Monte Cassino, Marco and his men lie exhausted in their foxholes, listening to the distant hum of engines and the occasional crackle of gunfire. They are alive, but acutely aware that survival requires constant learning and adaptation. The Shermans are not just weapons. They are a force multiplier, symbols of industrial might and battlefield precision that demand respect and careful planning from every opponent who faces them. February the 2nd, 1944. Monte Cassino, Italy. The first rays of the winter sun illuminate the shattered landscape, painting the valleys and ridges in a cold, pale light. Lieutenant Marco Rossi trudges along the cratered roads with Sergeant Giovanni Bianchi, surveying the aftermath of another day of Sherman advances. The air is thick with smoke, dust, and the faint metallic tang of spent ammunition. Every step is a reminder of the battle's relentless pace and the unyielding efficiency of the American armored divisions. Marco pauses atop a ridge, watching as a Sherman column emerges from a hidden defile, perfectly aligned, guns trained, engines humming. He cannot hide his astonishment. For weeks he has witnessed these tanks appear where they were least expected, neutralize entrenched positions, and move with a coordination that defies conventional understanding. The realization hits him fully. The American strength lies not only in the tanks themselves, but in the industrial system that produces and sustains them. In a nearby dugout, Colonel Vittorio Lombardi addresses the remaining officers. "These are not mere machines," he states, voice heavy with both awe and frustration. "Each Sherman represents the output of factories, the training of crews, and a supply network that moves faster than our strategies can respond. We are not only facing steel and fire, we are confronting an entire industrial machine." The officers exchange silent nods, understanding the truth that has dawned over weeks of bitter engagement. Italian soldiers recount encounters in hushed tones, still struggling to reconcile courage and futility. Marco listens as Private Alessandro Moretti describes how a Sherman seemingly appeared over a hill, destroying a dug-in artillery position before the crew could react. "It is as if they materialize from the mist," Moretti whispers, eyes wide. The story is met with quiet murmurs of agreement. The miraculous appearance of tanks has become a recurring motif, reinforcing the perception of invincibility. Even German liaison officers, observers trained in armored warfare, express shock. Hauptmann Dieter Klein notes in his field journal, "The M4 Sherman is not only robust, but endlessly maneuverable, supported by an infrastructure that guarantees its presence at every critical point." The Italians are learning, often too late, that technical efficiency can outmatch tactical ingenuity. Marco reads the passage over Klein's shoulder, a grim smile tugging at his lips. It confirms what he already knows. The war has shifted from mere bravery and local tactics to the orchestration of resources, logistics, and industrial might. By mid-morning, Monte Cassino bears the scars of relentless armored operations. Craters pockmark the valleys, ruins smolder on the ridges, and soldiers move cautiously among debris. Marco observes that Italian troops, while fatigued and demoralized, have begun adapting to the rhythm of Sherman attacks, anticipating routes, setting more effective ambushes, and coordinating artillery with renewed discipline. Yet even as they improve, the Americans continue to push forward, replacing losses and maintaining pressure with a consistency that seems inexhaustible. As the sun sets, Marco and Bianchi sit in silence, reflecting on weeks of engagement. Every encounter with the Shermans has been a lesson in humility, adaptation, and strategic understanding. Marco realizes that the Americans' success is not a matter of luck or individual skill alone. It is the product of foresight, organization, and a nation's industrial capacity applied decisively on the battlefield. The psychological impact is profound. Where once fear dominated, respect now tempers apprehension. Marco acknowledges that, despite every effort, survival requires constant vigilance and adaptation, and that the efficiency of the Shermans is a tangible expression of the broader American war machine. Each tank, each coordinated maneuver, and each logistical reinforcement is a reminder that the Italians are facing a force that combines technological prowess with relentless operational discipline. Night falls over Monte Cassino. The distant hum of Sherman engines continues, a lullaby and a warning in one. Marco lies in his foxhole, staring at the stars, reflecting on the paradox. These tanks are simultaneously terrifying and awe-inspiring, instruments of destruction and symbols of human ingenuity. The lessons of Monte Cassino, the need for anticipation, adaptation, and respect for industrial power, will remain long after the battle ends, shaping strategies and perceptions for the remainder of the Italian campaign. By the time silence descends, Marco understands the enduring truth. The efficiency, coordination, and sheer presence of American Shermans have not only reshaped the battlefield, but altered the very calculus of war, teaching him and his comrades that modern conflict is won as much by production lines and logistics as by courage and firepower.